We are live. Welcome, everybody watching behind the scenes, Facebook, YouTube. It's really the only places that we stream, so that's okay. If you would like to drop a comment, please drop a comment. We might get to them at the end of the show. We have a very special show for you today that we're going to get into shortly. And instead of just plugging a bunch of stuff because I have nothing prepared, all we're going to do is jump into the show. So on that note, hey, I'm Jordan Burke, and welcome to Saints and Sages. This is a special episode with a special guest, a dear friend of mine, subbing in for KP. Catalina, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Catalina. So I'm from Puerto Rico, cradle Catholic, born and raised Catholic all my life. Raised in the East Coast, but I live in Puerto Rico right now, which is a blessing. It's a beautiful place, and I love it in the mountains. So I work for a couple different people and do a little bit of Catholic projects everywhere. First one is Bienvenido Catholic. It's a Hispanic outreach apostolate that we do where we promote Catholic values and focus on pro-life issues. It's mainly not a political thing, but it's focused on voting rights and things like that. I also do Rosary Coast to Coast, which I hope everyone has heard about.
Father Richard Hellman, right?
Yes, Father Richard Hellman. So Anne Brie Dale, they're part of the team, and they do an amazing job. And I am so blessed to be a part of this project. It's huge. It's praying the rosary. So what we do is we unite people from different parts of the country, and we pray the rosary together. So at 3 p.m., we come all together simultaneously and pray the rosary. Rosaries coast to coast. Super powerful.
It's super powerful. Yeah.
Yes. And this year, we haven't set a launch date yet, but we will. We have people waiting around the country worldwide to do this, and it's very, very efficacious. So check it out, rosarycoasttocoast.com. And lastly, a big project that I need prayers for is Viva Guadalupe, and it is constructing a building right beside Mexico's city, the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And we are doing a little pro-life center and chapel dedicated to the unborn. So it's called the International Memorial to the Unborn, vivaguadalupe.com. So those are a couple of things that I do.
And most importantly, you've graciously agreed to sub in for KP for the time being. We're very thankful. Yes. And you have a deep passion for the saints. It's one of the ways that you and I connected initially through Instagram. By the way, what is your Instagram for those who want to find you? If you're comfortable throwing that out there. I know I just kind of threw.
Now I have to, Jordan.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
It's Catalina.Ramos and the number 13.
And that's where you can find all of her pictures of the paradise that she lives in Puerto Rico, which I'm probably pronouncing poorly. But then also all the projects that you're working on from Rosary Coast to Coast. You kind of keep people updated there as well. But that's how we connected. We most importantly, we connected with St. Alphonsus Liguori, which I don't want to jump too far ahead. I know we're going to talk about that at some point.
Yeah.
But we both have quite the affinity for St. Alphonsus. Interestingly enough, you introduced me to the book that I'm sure we will talk about, but Uniformity with God's Will. And it was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. So I'm going to save that. But today we wanted to do sort of a Saints 101. Right. It's what are the saints? Why are they needed? These sorts of things. And I would love for you to kind of expand. I know we talked briefly before this, what is a saint? If you want to get into that, whether it's an exact definition or kind of like a layman's definition would be great. Why are they needed? Any of these that you want to kind of touch on, I'd love to talk about.
Yes. So I love the topic of the saints. And when it comes to basics of the faith, I love it even more because I think we need to go back to the basics of our faith. We've complicated it somewhat, with a lot of things added and subtracted in the liturgy and the faith, things like that. And so it's good to go back to the basics. I love it. So a saint, what is a saint? A saint is a person who we know is in heaven. You cannot be a saint here on earth because we're not.
That's not how the process works.
I know, that's not how the process works. You just don't get that title here.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
So once you hit heaven, you get the title. You're a saint. You know you're a saint when you're in heaven. So that's how we know these people are in heaven, because they're canonized. They're canonized as saints. They're people with heroic virtue. And this is like extraordinary virtue, something that they have worked their entire lives for, this perfect virtue. And obviously it is not by their own means. This is something that they need God for. You need God to be a saint. It's basics.
Right. Now, and I don't mean to cut you off. I'm curious because you sparked a thought. We don't get the title of saint here on earth, but we do get some sort of titles. I was learning with Blessed Chiara. Am I pronouncing that right? Or
Chiara.
Not Blessed, I'm sorry. Servant of God. See, this is where it gets complicated. These are the titles, right?
Yeah.
So there's Servant of God. There is Blessed. Is Venerable. Do you know the rankings? That's what I'm getting at. I don't know what the rankings are.
Yeah, I don't know the rankings either.
Okay.
I know it goes, hold on. It goes, I believe it goes Servant of God, Venerable, Blessed, and then Saint.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think. Yes.
Okay.
Maybe somebody can correct us on that, but
that'd be great. Well, people correct us all the time anyway, so it's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Especially me. So okay, so there's titles we can't get the title of saint on earth. Doesn't mean that we can't strive for sainthood. It's just we won't leave with that particular, plaque, so to speak. But back to your point, why, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, why should we strive to be saints?
Because it's our purpose. That's the only way you're going to get to heaven, Jordan. It's the only way we can get to heaven. We cannot have stain. And a saint is someone who has purified themselves so much to the point that they are perfect to enter heaven, right? It says it in scripture, I believe, somewhere. I'm not really good at this. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they shall see God, all those things. So, you have to be perfect to get into heaven.
That's right.
And that's the purpose, right?
So then I think, and I apologize if I'm throwing questions at you, but you're sparking all these thoughts. Does that mean that once we go through purgatory, we are then saints? Or is there, and I apologize if I'm complicating things here, but so I'd venture, so you said we have to be purified, which I agree with everything that you're saying. We have to be purified in order to become saints. We have to have supernatural grace to become saints. So does that mean that when we complete purgatory, we become saints?
Sure. I would guess so. I haven't been there yet, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I would guess so, because we need to be purified, right? If we are not purified here on earth, then we go to purgatory, we purify there, and then boom, we hit heaven.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I'm you're sparking these thoughts, and I'm curious. I didn't know if you had the answer or not. So.
No, it's such an interesting topic, though, honestly, because you think about the saints and you think about their lives, and we even like looking at, for example, Saint Gemma Galgani or Saint Catherine of Siena, the Doctor of the Church, Saint Francis of Assisi, Seraphim. We think of all these saints, and we're like, how can we do it?
Right.
It seems like they have purified their entire, like every step of their lives was a purification process, and it was, ultimately for God, and they went straight to heaven. I mean, they purified on earth, but I really think that once you purify in purgatory, then you go to heaven, because there's no going down.
Right.
It's just going up.
And my thought process too, or at least for people who are listening, and I may have said this before, but my goal personally is to purify as much here on heaven, so I spend as little time in purgatory as possible. My goal, if at all possible, is to go straight to heaven. I mean,
straight to heaven.
If you're I know you're familiar with this, Catalina, but the devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows, and one of the promises of Our Lady of Sorrows is basically, hey, if you continue to do this daily, one of the promises, you skip purgatory. You go straight, right? So
Yes.
I'd
Our
rather
Lady
not.
of Carmel too, the scapulars. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, there's so much treasure in the church where you can make it to heaven.
Right.
Trust me.
Right.
You could do it.
And importantly, all of these promises were delivered to us, as far as I'm aware, by saints.
By saints.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but so Our Lady of Mount Carmel was delivered to who? I would say, who was it again?
Saint Simon's Stock, I
Okay,
believe. Saint Simon's
so a
Stock.
saint, and then Our
Saint,
Lady of
yes.
Sorrows, right? So it all of the stuff walks hand in hand, and it's super interesting. So then it begs the question. Great, that's awesome. These saints are powerful. They're amazing. There's all these promises. This is how we get to heaven. But why are they needed in our time currently?
Yes. They absolutely are needed for our time because they show us that we can do it, that it is possible, that we can make it to heaven. Why? Because they've gone through this life. They've gone through earth, and they have done everything that we have done as well. They were humans just like us. And so they are, in a sense, I don't know if I'm about to go blasphemous or heretical, but in a sense, they're more, they give us gosh, this is terrible, a better example than Christ of how we can get to heaven. I don't think that's the right way of saying it, but in a sense, because Christ is God, he could do it.
Right. And I have an idea of what you're saying. You're saying basically they give us a more, maybe personal example.
I think that's a better way of saying it. Yes.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to word. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've said this before myself, where it's, the saints have this unique representation of they've paved the pathway for us, but
Exactly.
they've all paved a different sort of pathway. So like I will relate to a particular saint more than someone else. I will relate to Saint Augustine more than some people. I love, this, everyone who listens to the show, who follows me on Instagram, you and I are friends, so this as well, but I'm obsessed with Saint Gemma, right? So I relate to her on a different level, as I'm sure you relate to certain saints. So it's not so much that they have a better example than Christ. It's just an example. Each saint provides a specific example that we can kind of grasp onto, maybe more than others.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're coming up on a break here in a couple seconds, but when we come back from the break, I really want to talk about what those pathways look like, because each one has been different, as we kind of mentioned. Maybe some of the struggles, maybe how they, maybe some of the underlying themes that each one had, and a few other things. But anyway, we'll get to that after the break. We will be right back. I think it was like 2 seconds early on that. Sorry if I'm throwing questions at. I love
it.
Okay,
no, I love it because it's better that way than me just kind of thinking of something else.
Right. Okay. Good. Good. For those who are watching behind the scenes, thank you so much for hanging in there with us. If you have any questions, please throw them in the chat, and we may have a chance at the end of the show to get to them, put them up on screen. Kind of cool interactive feature. And also, do we have any classes that we need to promote? Avila-institute.org. Go find some classes. They're good for you. They're good for your soul. They're good for your brain. They're good for your heart. What else is good? They're good for your eyes, because it's holy things that you can gaze upon. That being said, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to Saints and Sages. I am Jordan Burke with special guest Catalina Ramos from Puerto Rico. Is that accurate, or is my accent way off?
No, you're great.
Okay. All right. I have a feeling that you're being nice, but that's okay. So before the break, we were talking about the saints, their struggles, or we briefly touched on saints that have struggled, rather, and why it's important for our time. And I would like to dive deeper into the struggle, especially now. I feel like suffering in general is a topic that everyone really relates to. I think it's really applicable in our time with everything that's going on in the world. And I don't think that there is a better representation on how to navigate suffering than the saints. Would you agree? And what are your thoughts there?
I absolutely agree. I think they give us the best example of how we can overcome the struggles and really transform and redeem them and make them, purposeful. We suffer when we suffer without God, we suffer with no purpose. When we suffer with
Mm,
God, we suffer with purpose, and
mm,
it has merit. And that's the best thing. It's almost comforting, that we can suffer and it's used more than just, that, we could do so much more. We could do so much with suffering. And just to think that it can gain us access to heaven and give us the ability to have that saint plaque on our
right.
desk. Yeah.
Our gold heavenly desk saint right there. I like that a lot.
So it's absolutely, in a sense, suffering is necessary.
Right.
Get to
Right.
heaven.
Yeah. Necessary to the point where Jesus literally said, if you want to be my disciple, take up your cross and follow me.
Mm,
And that is
yes.
suffering itself. I mean, I know that I sound like a broken record. I harp on this all the time, but it's so important, and it's something that I think people really struggle with grasping, or it just kind of goes over their head. I'm not sure what it is. There's some sort of disconnect when it comes to suffering. But on that note, one of the guys I think that teaches the best about suffering so far that I've read, and it's not saying that I've read everything on the saints. I most certainly have not, but it's a book that you introduced me to in passing, and it took off like wildfire. We started promoting it.
Oh, wow.
And what was that? Maybe last summer, and it roughly. And
yes, I think so.
not to date the podcast or anything, but it took off like wildfire, and I still buy it in bulk and give it out to everyone. You give
awesome.
right. And it is Uniformity with God's Will by St. Alphonsus Liguori. So you're at yes, thank you. For those who are watching behind the scenes, she's showing it on the screen.
Here it is.
You're the one who introduced me to it. So why don't you kind of give a rundown of what it is?
Okay, so Uniformity with God's Will. I get so excited about this book. It's sometimes I have no words because I can't really explain the depth and the treasure that this book is. Honestly, it is gold.
Right.
To quote you, Jordan. So I was actually, back up a little bit, and I used to go to Latin Mass when I lived in Virginia, and they would give this out for free, and they would have them in a little table, kind of outside the narthex, and just Catholic stuff, information. And they had this book there. I took it and I said, "Oh, Uniformity with God's Will. That sounds interesting." And I took it home and stuck it away, put it away, and left it there for like ever. And then I decided one day to pick it up and read it. And I was amazed because I think it was perfect timing. It was a time in my life where I needed to know God's will. I needed to be kind of liberated from just the gunk that I was in, like I needed God to help me basically in my situation. And so I read the book and I reread it and I said, this is amazing. Uniformity with God's Will is basically Alphonsus de Liguori talking about how we can unite our will to God's will, how we can be uniform with God's will, how we can live in freedom, basically.
in all things.
In all things.
And for those who are unaware, this isn't like this super thick book. It's not 300 pages. It's more, it's like a pamphlet. Yeah. If you're watching behind the scenes, she's holding it up. It's super tiny. I actually used to carry it in my back pocket. That's how tiny it is.
That's awesome.
For a couple months after I read it. And my story with it is very similar to yours, where it was at this point in my life where I was going through some tremendous hardships, and I was suffering, and I wouldn't say I was suffering well. I would say I was probably enduring the suffering, which are two very different things. Mm-hmm. And this book allowed me to embrace suffering in a way that I never have before. And the book is not about suffering, even though I've said that word about 12 times in the past 30 seconds. It's about uniformity with God's will, but it touches on suffering. And so, and a little bit of background, St. Alphonsus Liguori, for those who don't know, is a saint, right? Which is why we're talking about him. He's a doctor of the church. He is a spiritual powerhouse. But he really, in this book, he really succinctly puts what it is to unite your will to God's will. Mm-hmm. And he does it in such a clear and precise way. And if I was to break it down, and I'd like you to correct me if you think that I'm wrong or if there's a better way to say it, but it really boils down to two things. whatever happens in your life, or one thing really, whatever happens in your life is either willed or
Mm.
permitted by God. One of
Yes.
those two. I mean, that's it.
That's it. That's it. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the part. This is my favorite part, and I have to reread it all the time just to remind myself. So it's a little basic part that I'm going to read from the book of Uniformity with God's Will. It says, conformity signifies that we join our wills to the will of God. But uniformity with God's will, means more. It means that we make one will of God's will and ours, so that we will only what God wills. That God's will alone is our will. And that is a tongue twister, but it's so true.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic, but he makes it very, very clear.
It's super clear. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that book, and this is the purpose. This is why we do this show. This is why we study the saints. This is why, as you said in the beginning, the saints are the basics. You know, when we have confusion in the church, when we have confusion in teaching, when we have all these different things, it's like, okay, let's go back. Let's go back to the basics. What did Alphonsus Liguori say? He's a doctor of the church. Okay, what did Augustine say? He's a doctor of the church. Teresa of Avila, she is a doctor of the church, right? I catch myself. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This is why we have a fact checker on the scene, because I have these moments of like my brain just kind of losing itself. She's shaking her head at me. It's okay. I deserve it. But this is why we do these things, and this is why we study the saints. So now I'm curious. So we touched on suffering, and that is kind of I haven't found a better way to say this, but like a through line, or a unifying factor, maybe a better way to say it, with all of the saints that we know, or at least all the saints that I've studied, suffering and embracing suffering. What are some of the other kind of common factors that you're aware of with saints, things that we can kind of grasp onto and learn and use in our daily lives?
Well, back to St. Alphonsus, uniting our will to God's, knowing all the saints did God's will. They did God's will. They pursued his will in everything. And second to that, humility and obedience. I mean, it's necessary. These virtues are necessary to be a saint. When we follow God's will, when we ask for his will, we are walking towards sainthood, because that's the only way we're going to get to heaven, if we know God's will. I remember, I don't know if it was Saint Gemma or Saint Faustina. It probably was Saint Gemma, where she wanted to pray, but God said, no, it's time for you to sleep.
Right. It was Saint Gemma. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Saint Gemma. And her obedience, it's holy obedience. You have to obey. Yes, praying is a good thing. Yes, it's really, really good. But obedience is first and foremost. And he wanted her to rest. So obedience is absolutely necessary. Humility, to know that God is the one in charge, not you.
Right.
You know, and uniting our wills to his, our will to his, is those are like the basics.
Right. No, and prayer is necessary, but obedience is more necessary, to your point. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's, for those who are unaware of the story, real quick, Saint Gemma had a very personal relationship with her guardian angel. And had she had her way, she and her guardian angel would have stayed up all night talking. She'd ask him questions and just learn and pray. And at one point, her guardian angel said, listen, God said you need to go to bed.
Yeah, that's right. It's so funny.
So prayer, so suffering, embracing suffering, unifying our will to God's will, holy obedience, humility. These are all common, factors of what makes a saint, or what is really prevalent in the lives of the saints. And we have about, 2.5 minutes left. What else can you think in regards to like making a saint, or why the saints are so important? What are your thoughts in general kind of on this in Saints 101?
Basically, we all should have a patron saint, right? If you don't, you can pick one. And I know, for example, my father, he was confirmed, but he never chose a saint, to walk with him through his life. And I think it's important that we take a specific saint that you are drawn to. I like to say that the saints have a SME. This is a military term. A SME is, I wrote it down before I forget, subject matter expertise. They all have a specific, like something, you mentioned this a little earlier, that they have like this almost, you're attracted to Saint Gemma for a reason, you know, somebody else to Saint Augustine for a reason, me to Saint Catherine and Saint Joseph for some reason. You know, they all have their specific subject matter expertise that they can help you with. For example, I love Saint Anthony of Padua. Like, he helps people find things. Yesterday I asked for his intercession, and I found him like less than 5 minutes. And I'm like, this is his subject matter expertise. This is like his special thing. So if you pick a patron saint, choose your patron saint wisely, whichever one, you know, attracts you to them, and whatever their specific, whatever is that you like, you know, they will help you through life, and they will never leave you, like your guardian angel. So that's kind of something, a basic thing that everybody could do.
That's
to
a
benefit
powerful
from
point.
saints.
That's a powerful point. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm also glad that you kind of gave an example, because I've actually had several guys come to me and say, I don't have one, and what do I do? And I have, up until this point, I've had no response for them, because I just wasn't aware. So that's really helpful. We are coming to the last 30 seconds of the show. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I really hope that this was edifying for others and kind of gives a little bit more information as to why we do what we do, and why we spend so much time with the saints, and why we should all spend more time with the saints. So with that, Catalina, go ahead and give your Instagram one more time, if you don't mind, and then we will close out.
Yes. So it's Catalina.Ramos, the number 13.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys in a couple weeks. Have a good one. I don't know how to close it anymore. Bye.
Be a saint.
Oh, there you go. All right. Yeah, you can put it offline. Yeah. There's